Greetings, fellow seekers of the unknown. Join us at Paranormal M to explore stories that defy logic and challenge reality. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to join us on this journey through the unexplainable. Where am I going when I dream? Why do I feel this way? I rarely talk about this. I hope I'm not the only one. Where do you go when you dream? Do you remember your dreams? Is there anything about your dreamscape that stands out to you? I've always felt different, like I have an extra sense or frequency that I can't quite identify. I've had the ability to sense bad situations and feel when people are being untrue or unfaithful to me. I've been able to tell what song will come on the radio next, and frequently have street lamps black out when I walk past them. I'm not a believer in the paranormal or in psychic abilities. However, I can't deny the feeling that there's something more that I can't see. I've always slept normally. I had what I considered to be normal dreams. They were never linked to each other in any way, but I've had the ability to recount my dreams with incredible accuracy. Approximately 4 years ago, when I would fall asleep, I would enter a familiar space. This space is huge. For the sake of this thread, let's just say that it isn't the size of a community or a city, but approximately the size of a whole county. Also, for the sake of this thread, I'm going to call this place my dream county. There are cities, towns, identifying markers, and places that I'm totally familiar with in my dreams. However, none of these locations have names. I am able to travel freely around my dream county, and I'm fairly lucid while doing so. However, never realize that I'm in fact dreaming while it's happening. There are people there that I'm pretty familiar with, though they have no names. We often work together to complete tasks, or do fun and thrilling things, and even just sit and talk. My whole dream county is familiar to me. It feels like home. I enjoy going to sleep every night, with that feeling that I'm going somewhere welcoming. I never do the same thing twice in my dreams, and the subject matter is ever evolving. I love this place like a second home, and although I feel I know about every part of it, occasionally I will discover a new area that's unexplored, and it'll become pretty much absorbing, and it'll become that part of my dream county. There's a few things I know for certain about my dream county, and that's as follows. 1. I never have my phone, ever. It doesn't even seem to be something that exists to me or anyone else in this place. 2. No matter what I'm doing, I'm familiar with where I am and who I'm with, even if not by name. 3. Usually, no one from my real life is in my dreams. We'll reflect on this later. 4. I never dream of places I've actually been to. 5. My dream self has a very deep sense of feelings and obligation to help others. 6. If I ever encounter a place in the real world that I've seen in my dream county, avoid that place at all costs. When this all started with my dream county, I felt it was something that would pass, a phase in my life that I couldn't control. But now that it's been going on for over 4 years, I've accepted that it's not a phase, and my subconscious is taking me somewhere beyond my control. I've learned about myself from my dreamscape that I don't think the living physical me could have comprehended by myself. I've learned lessons, had struggles, and fought through emotions in my dreams. After about 2 years of these dream things started to get weird. One day I was driving with my wife as a passenger in an unfamiliar stretch of highway between Dallas, Texas and San Antonio, when I suddenly was completely and totally aware of where I was. I had just driven into this place that I had never physically been to before, but was in fact a part of my dream county. I've been here in my dreams many times before. I had an extreme sense of foreboding that I needed to leave that area immediately and never go back. So I did just that and detoured 2 hours out of the way to get away from that area to get home. It was at this point that I obviously had to tell my wife about my dreams and why, because I had just diverted 2 hours and 100 miles out of the way from my home. I told her about everything I'd kept to myself and never told anyone about. My dreams, my feelings, my sense of some sort of frequency that I couldn't quite get in tune with. Fortunately for me, she was more intrigued by it than concerned, and she's accepted it as part of who I am. We've been married for over 10 years now, and she's the best thing in my life, and my biggest advocate. Now back to my dreams. Since the experience of encountering part of my dream in real life, I haven't had a similar experience. I have an extreme sense of foreboding that it may happen again, and if it does, to avoid that area at all costs. I can't explain why I feel this way. It's just always there. Over time, weird things continued to happen in my dreams that would then correlate with things that would happen later in the real world. I wouldn't call it psychic or predicting the future as much as just sensing something would happen. Or, in a dream, would embrace me for something that was, well, not embrace, it would brace me for something that was about to come, be it good or bad. I started paying closer attention to my dreams to see if I could learn something from them. About 3 years into my dream county, something happened that had never happened before. I recognized 2 people by name and face that I knew from the real world. They were prior employers of mine, and although I knew them, the landscape around them was completely foreign and new. I had never been to this place before, but I had a horrible feeling about it. They kept trying to get me to come back to work for them, and I kept turning them down over and over because I had this horrible feeling about everything. I thought something bad was going to happen. Eventually, I was able to convince them to leave the area to what I thought was a better place for them, and I specifically remember feeling relieved for them, like they were safe. These dreams continued intermittently for a few months here and there, not every night. My home state was devastated by fires this last summer. The worst fires out I've really ever seen, in hundreds and thousands of acres of land burned in the process. I watched as the fire surrounded the business where I used to work, as they evacuated everyone from the area. And I somehow knew that even though this was a horrible event, somehow it would be okay for them. As the fires died down and the smoke cleared, one of the only surviving areas was 50 acres of land in which their business stood. Not a single ounce of it was burned. After all this happened, I haven't dreamed of them again, and I get this feeling that for some reason, they were put into my dreams for a reason, and I knew things would be okay for them. This is the only time someone from the outside world that I know or knew has entered my dream county. Now, after hearing all this, please know that I'm totally normal and I'm rational. I had a fairly traditional upbringing, although we were poor. I was bullied all through school for being different, although I never really understood what was different about me as opposed to everyone else. I joined the military at 17 years old to toughen myself up, and boy did it ever work. It also framed me up for a tough, no-nonsense rational mindset that the military works hard to instill in its soldiers. After the military, I went on to college, got happily married to my dream woman, had 3 amazing children, and a professional career as a business management expert. I know it isn't rational or normal to have these thoughts and feelings. I've encountered abuse, PTSD, and seen and done things that I'm not proud of, and I try to use these experiences as a way to rationalize my dreams. But the thing is, I never dream about these experiences or places. I have no rational way to explain my dreams, feelings, or senses. I feel like if I tell others, they'll just think I'm nuts. The only person I've ever told was my wife, and I still keep it to myself mostly. I want to know if anyone else out there experiences this. I'm not crazy, I know I'm not. I don't believe in mediums or psychics, but I can't deny this whole experience and just write it off as it is what it is. I've been experiencing this for so long now that I believe something more is going on that I can't quite tap into. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if I'm tapping into an alternate dimension and seeing another version of myself. And other times I catch myself wondering if I'm actually dreaming the real world, and my sleep self is actually the real me. If I think too much about it, it starts to feel like Inception, and I have to snap myself out of it. I love my dream county. I love going there every night. I have a home there that I know is my own, people that I know are friends. I have places that I love to frequently visit and places that I like to avoid. I have a whole sense of self in there that only exists in that plane. It's too complicated to try to describe all of it through text, but I'd love to talk to somebody about it over the phone or in person or a live chat. I'm not crazy. Is there anyone out there who maybe experiences this? Is there anyone out there who studies these phenomena that I can talk to try to figure this out? Is there someone out there who knows someone like this? Are there scientists or professionals who can explain what's going on? Can't be the only one. Someone out there has the answers, and that's the reason I'm reaching out. I would like to remain anonymous just for the fact that this is my first time ever reaching out or telling my story, and I'm scared that I'll be made fun of or demeaned or ostracized in some shape or form. I'm not scared of my dreams or how I feel. I just want to know why and how, and if there are others. Please help. Well, I hope by telling your story, one of our listeners might reach out to you. If there's anyone out there that relates to this, drop a comment below, would you? Strange neighborhood happenings. I recently moved into my first home out of college with my boyfriend. It seems like a great neighborhood, and the house was really nice. But then as soon as we started moving in, we got an uneasy feeling. Our neighbors would watch us as we moved in, but not in a normal way, if that makes sense. Like, as soon as we started moving stuff, one of our neighbors would come out of her house, plant a chair on the lawn, and watch us. Even now, every time I glance at this particular neighbor's house, I see her peeking through the blinds, watching me. She's not the only strange neighbor, though. I've had multiple people from the neighborhood come up to me that I had never met, come up and ask about me and my boyfriend's jobs. They already knew where we worked before, and we didn't have any conversations with our neighbors. I had plans with friends for Independence Day, and as I was getting ready to pull out of the driveway, I see my neighbor suddenly standing outside my car window. He asked me, "Are you trying to leave?" I told him, "Yeah, I'm going to a 4th of July party." And he said, "Well, we have the street blocked off, so you won't be able to leave." I said, "Well, my boyfriend is going to go leave because he works tonight." And he said, "Well, I guess we can remove the roadblocks. But just so you know, we have a 4th of July party every year." And the roadblock wasn't a big deal. And I don't know. This wasn't that weird. But as I was driving away, a kid threw a firecracker at my car. Just odd. One night, about a month after we moved in, my friends and I were hanging out on my deck, having a few beers and talking. Then we heard sirens and saw an ambulance and police officers driving across the neighborhood. We weren't super concerned until they pulled up to one of our other neighbors' houses. A woman who lived there was on her porch, screaming and crying into the officers, sobbing and yelling, "I cut him down, I cut him down." Then they loaded her husband's body into the ambulance while we watched. We learned later that he had hung himself and he died. The wife of the man who had died was a very strange character as well. She would randomly, not extremely often, but enough for it to be a pattern, wander out of her house late at night around the neighborhood. We learned from one of our, well, let's just say our one normal neighbor, that her wanderings happened long before the husband had killed himself. Finally, we had, I guess we'll call them odd happenings in our house sometimes, where the lights flicker, our smoke alarms randomly go off, and I've even woken up with scratches up and down my arms. One night, I was laying on the couch and had fallen asleep. I woke up to the sound of someone in the kitchen, and in my sleepy state, I assumed it was my boyfriend. But then I called his name. I heard no answer. I called again and asked what he was doing. But then I looked in the kitchen and saw no one. Then, as soon as I looked, the deck light outside turned on. My boyfriend came out of the room and asked if I had heard something in the kitchen too. I was creeped out, but I got up and went to the door by the deck to shut off the light. But when I did, I saw a neighbor directly across the yard out on her deck, standing perfectly still, staring at me. I was super spooked because it was late, like 2:30 a.m. at this point, and she was fully outside, posted, and staring. She wasn't doing a task, wasn't even smoking, nothing. Just standing and staring. I quickly shut off the light and then went around to all the doors to make sure that they were locked. But when I got to the front door, it was unlocked and open 3 inches, which makes no sense because we have a habit of shutting and locking the doors every time we come inside. Whether night or day, I locked it and we looked around the house to make sure no one was in there. We slept in our room with the door locked that night. I don't know what to make of our experiences at this point. Every neighbor mentioned in this post is a different neighbor, and the whole neighborhood just has an off vibe. My friends think and I hate to think this, that my neighbors are somehow involved in the strange instances in the house, and that they aren't necessarily watching me when they're staring, but rather watching whatever entities or vibes or whatever are in our house. I had a realization tonight that made my hair stand on edge. For context, I've been watching a lot of BuzzFeed paranormal videos, because they're entertaining, but they also remind me of everything paranormal I've ever been through. I like to remember my experiences, to relate to the experiences that they're talking about. But tonight, I made an intense realization that made goosebumps shoot down my arms. I've always had a strange reaction to specifically the paranormal. I'm a 20-year-old man that has only really cried when an extreme emotional event happened, like a death in the family or hard breakups. But whenever I hear something unreasonably paranormal, my eyes randomly produce tears. Could be a ghost story, could be somebody talking about a ghost experience. I don't feel scared at all, actually feel calm with a feeling of being unnerved. I really don't understand why this happens. Keep this in mind because it kind of ties into this. I've always had a weak immune system, and it was worse as a kid. This one time I was incredibly sick and bedridden to the point of hallucination. I saw a hawk fly into my window that didn't exist. But most notably, I saw a full-scale apparition. I mean, it didn't even look like a traditional ghost. It wasn't see-through. It wasn't staring at me or talking to me or anything. If I could describe it, it was like when the white blood cells travel across your eye, as it moved kind of like that. This apparition had long, flowing blonde hair, flowing as if she were underwater. Weird fact, because I'm studying to be a marine biologist, and will most likely have a job close to the area and the sea, but I digress. She was wearing a wedding dress, and as soon as I saw her, my mind went, I will marry this woman one day. The apparition then phased through a door and disappeared. Pretty creepy, but I chalked it up to being delusional, just thoughts a child that's extremely sick might have. Fast forward at least 6 years. I have a shelf on my wall that holds nerd things, in particular a bottle of Juggernaut from the Call of Duty series. I get up from my bed and do something, and I notice the bottle is missing from the shelf. As soon as I realize this, the bottle comes zooming past my head from behind me, as if someone had thrown it. It doesn't shatter, it just hits the carpet, but I remember it spinning past my head. There is zero possibility it dropped from the shelf. I was standing at least 2 feet away from it, and it landed nowhere near it would land. Even if it had fallen, it would have fallen on my desk below the shelf and shattered. I was calm for zero reason. I checked my closet, which was in the direction that it came from. Nothing. My mind went, intruder in my closet? Nope. Okay. I placed the bottle back on the shelf and walked away. My intense realization was the ghost woman in the wedding dress disappeared in the exact same location that the bottle would have been thrown from. And both times, I was incredibly calm, even though I had experienced someone throwing something at me as well as seeing a full-scale apparition. I don't know what to make of this realization. I'm out of that house, as it's my parents' house, and nothing else malicious has ever happened to us, so I'm not so worried. The only typical Indian burial ground scenario to explain any of this is that the house is built on land where the Civil War was fought. But I don't find that really relevant. This is one of the many strange occurrences that happened in that house. Nothing else is worth mentioning. I just wanted to share this realization to some people who might find it interesting. My experience on the other side. This story takes place in 2016, when I was a paratrooper with the 1st Brigade 82nd Airborne, stationed at Fort Bragg. I had dabbled in psychedelics since high school, but had never experienced leaving my body. In the Army, my psychedelic usage was increased considering that LSD and mushrooms didn't show up on drug tests. It was December, and I had recently stocked up on about 30 hits of acid. I had been taking acid consecutively, only leaving enough time in between trips to get an effect. Anyway, it was Monday, and we had day and night range planned from 400 weapons draw, going into a night shoot. I was sick of the grunt life. So, I had the idea of making my day at the range a little bit more fun by dropping a bunch of acid. I took 425 UG tabs at around 0530 and kept 3 in my breast pocket just in case I wasn't really feeling strong enough. Transportation for the range showed up at like 7 o'clock. This is when I first noticed the acid creeping up. I remember leaning against my ruck and seeing my first sergeant walk outside of our company operating facility. His entire face was shifting, and I knew it was hitting. We hopped up on the trucks, headed to the range down on Long Street. First thing we had to do when we arrived was zero our rifles. I was an E4 team leader, an assistant gunner to be exact. This meant I wasn't closely watched by the non-commissioned officers, and I could zero my rifle unharassed. I looked down my ACOG and attempted to get a good sight picture. I could not. Everything was swaying. I fired my 3 rounds for a grouping and waited for the range to go cold. My grouping was shit, but there was no way in hell I was shooting again. I didn't wish to draw the attention of anyone who might have thought that I needed help shooting. I grabbed my target and left back to where we put down our rucks. Now at this point I almost smoked a spice vape. Yeah, I know that shit is horrible, but I was a dumb fuck who loved weed, and spice was an alternative that wouldn't really make my piss hot. I could smoke spice literally anywhere, because its odor was non-distinguishable from other vapes. So there I was, standing in a circle around my platoon's rucks with about 5 or 6 other people from my platoon, smoking and joking. I was really upset that I was at the range, but at this point, I decided to let go of my animosity and just enjoy the heavy dose of LSD. I remember just standing and staring off into the distance, until I finally caught the eyes of one of my sergeants, SGT Outlaw. I didn't dislike Outlaw, but sometimes he could be a nosy prick. Our eyes locked, and he came to talk to me. At first, I could understand him. He was asking me how I liked being a team leader now. Then his words became garbled and kinda quick. I quote-unquote heard. He didn't actually say these things, it's just what I heard. I heard him say things like, "I know you're on LSD. I know you didn't zero your rifle. First Sergeant knows too, and he's coming to get you now." I completely thought that it was SGT Outlaw talking to me. I thought I was fucked. But then I started to notice other things that seemed off. I didn't hear the gun fire that was previously chattering in the background anymore. I noticed that no one was moving except for slight idiosyncratic movements, For instance, to my right was Perez, and all I could see him doing was a stationary salsa dance. Even farther to my right was Porus. He was tapping his fingers together and whistling like an evil mastermind, stopping every few seconds to turn in my direction and say, "It's coming!" Now at this point I also realized that I couldn't move anything but my eyeballs, and slight head movements. After viewing my comrades and their oddities, I finally turned my gaze back to SGT Outlaw. But this time he looked different, the major change being his eyes. They were replaced by black swirls. His gaze was stuck on him, and I could feel only dread. I remember the voice when he spoke. It was like a loud whisper. It said to me, "So you want to take LSD? Do you want to learn the secrets of the universe? All you have to do is look left." At that moment, I noticed my left peripheral getting darker. It was almost like a flashlight of darkness, and it was shining from my left side. The feeling I got from this maelstrom of blackness was terrible. My sense of dread only furthered. I wasn't religious, but I prayed anyway. I remember staring at this entity in the form of my NCO for what felt like 5 to 7 minutes. The entire time I kept repeating to God that I would never take acid ever again, and to please just let me live through this. Then I felt control of my head movement slightly return. When the control returned, I heard voices say, "He didn't do it, what a bitch. Pussy didn't want to know." When I heard these voices, my dread disappeared and was replaced with a sense of loss, like I missed out on something. I might have replied with, "No, wait, I want to know." But I don't remember entirely. But what happened next has been embedded in my memory. I flew out of my body and into the sky. I kept being pulled farther and farther into the sky at speeds unimaginable. I remember being pulled across the US, east to west, and then above into space. I arrived at my ethereal destination and landed in a spectral chair in what seemed like a transparent waiting room in space. I could see Earth and the stars straight ahead of me. I could also hear typing, but I couldn't turn my head to see who was typing. When I arrived in this waiting room, the only feeling I can remember was nostalgia. It was the strongest feeling of nostalgia I'd ever felt. I also had thoughts that didn't feel like they were my own. No joke. I heard a thought go through my head saying in a semi-confused yet lighthearted tone, "Aw, shit, what am I doing back here? I need to get back into my body." Now this thought felt like it came from me, yet I had no conscious decision in making that thought. I sat in the transparent ethereal waiting room for about 10 seconds. After my 10 seconds were up, I immediately appeared back on Earth in my body. I was facing left towards where the dark maelstrom emitted from. The first 15 seconds back in my body, I had absolutely no memory of who I was. Then my memories flooding back, bringing me instant relief. I remember thinking, "Holy shit, I'm a human. My name is Ben. I'm fucking alive." The rest of the day at the range went smooth. I didn't feel like telling really anybody about this experience at the time. I even ended up taking the rest of the tabs in my pocket because I just kind of wanted to see if I could go back. Yeah, I was a little horrified at my experience, but more than that, I was intrigued. After that day, I researched OBEs, souls, theology, and metaphysics. I found some answers, but raised more than I found. I had another OBE 3 weeks later, again on acid, but this time in a more responsible location, my barracks room. This one was short yet useful because it confirmed my previous experience. I was listening to an EDM artist, Stephen Lyons, in my headset. And as I started vibing to the music, I closed my eyes and felt myself lift out of my body again. And this time I could move and look around. I looked around my barracks room and I could see that the walls were transparent. I could see into every room in the barracks with their inhabitants doing things like shower, playing video games, eating, or even sleeping. It was wonderful. But the wonder wore off when I remembered the dread I felt from my previous OBE. I instantly snapped back into my body. When I was reattuned with my physical form, my body had instinctively put my hands on the back of my head, as if trying to keep my soul connected. I researched this later. I found that souls are connected to our physical forms through a silver ethereal line in the back of our heads. I felt satisfied with my discoveries. Still, though, this was not my last encounter with the other side. My next OBE was months later on leave. I was back home in Los Angeles, and it was a lucid dream that had no drugs involved. I'll save that story for another time, though. My experience on the other side. After my experience in December, I had found that my mental state no longer aligned with the ethics of my profession. I was an infantryman. Closing within and destroying the enemy in close combat was something we all strove for. To understand this story, a little background on myself is necessary. When I first joined the Army, my motivation for combat came from a place of anger, confusion, and personal turmoil. My father raised me with violence, but I allowed his actions to affect and define my character. From 13, I begun to self-medicate with anything I could find, from weed and alcohol to pills, MDMA, and psychedelics. My junior year of high school, I voluntarily withdrew to attend rehab for an extended Xanax habit. I spent my 17th birthday in a rehab facility in East Texas. At 19, I graduated and joined the Airborne Infantry. I believed I had found my true calling and an outlet for my aggression. Unfortunately for me at the time, going to war is not a decision made by young privates. After a year of training, my brigade was placed on GRF, the Global Response Force, which was at the time a year-long sentence to garrison life. I had found no glory or bloodshed, instead boredom and bureaucracy. I expected war, and I received weekend staff duties and tactical laser tag. So I turned to an old enjoyment of mine, drugs. Due to persistent drug tests in the military, I stayed away from most narcotics. LSD and mushrooms became my drugs of choice, considering psychedelics are not tested with normal drug tests here. I began to push the limits of reality further and further. I loved raving. Taking high doses of acid and dancing my ass off to EDM became a consistent hobby of mine. Eventually, we were slotted for deployment. We were going to Kandahar. Finally, my goal was in sight. Although our deployment was still about 9 months away, fuck that. No reason to stop taking psychedelics. It was enjoyable and an excellent way to pass the time. Even with the extensive use of psychedelics, I still retained my jaded mentality. My psychedelic usage culminated in December of 2016, when my consciousness disconnected from my physical form and was pulled back into a transcendental state, in which I was given a glimpse into the world beyond. After returning from the other side, I found my headspace to be completely different. The newly found empathy and love gave me a positive purpose and direction. I was amazed at the information I had been blessed with. I witnessed firsthand that there was something beyond this life. Although more than seeing it, I had felt it. It was the deepest self-reflection I'd ever experienced. And after, I found I no longer had the gall to take human life. And here laid my moral dilemma. Our deployment to Kandahar was slotted for the summer of 2017. I was a team leader, an assistant gunner to be exact. I oversaw a machine gun team, which is a crucial part of the infantry platoon. The responsibility of my position weighed on me. Although I knew everything about the war was wrong, it used to never really bothered me, for I didn't care about the military-industrial complex profiting off the war. In my old mindset, I only cared about satisfying my desires for violence. After my experience, I couldn't even fathom killing another human, for I knew it is inherently wrong. Honestly, though it was an embarrassment that made me decide to revert to my old ways, I killed the good that was fostered inside of me, out of the fear of embarrassment. As Tim O'Brien said, in The Things That They Carry, I would go to war, I would kill and maybe die, because I was embarrassed not to. I now empathize with Mr. O'Brien, for I too was a coward. I knew it was wrong and I decided to go to war. Changing my mindset wasn't difficult. If you understand that the universe is mental and that thoughts control our world, nothing is impossible. Not using psychedelics anymore was also useful in reverting my ways of thought. Now this is where the story really begins. It was around early June 2017. I was on pre-deployment leave in my hometown of Santa Monica, California. My parents were living in Italy at the time, so I had decided to spend my leave in California with my aunt and my friends. My aunt owned a successful escrow business in Santa Monica. She lived in a beautiful condo at the corner of Ocean and California, overlooking the Pacific. She spoiled the fuck out of me while I was there, considering it was about to deploy. I had been on leave for at least a week when the incident occurred. I was watching TV with my aunt while having a glass of Dom Perignon. She bought that shit like water. I had exactly one glass, and that was it. My aunt was tired. She went to bed. Even though I was tired, and I had a bedroom to sleep in, I remained on the couch. I felt incredibly comfortable on the couch, so I decided to lie back and slip into slumber. I fell asleep almost instantaneously. What woke me up unexpected. My arm had fallen off the open side of the couch, and I felt something licking it like a small dog. My aunt had a cat, but the licking was incessant and didn't feel like a rough tongue of a feline. I rose from the couch to view it. It was a small dog. It looked akin to a miniature schnauzer, except for one defining feature. It had no skin. The creature hurried away as I rose from the couch. After standing up, I had noticed my blanket was still on the couch and had not fallen off when I stood up. But the blanket looked larger than I remembered, more puffed up like there was a mass of something underneath. It finally registered. The mass was me. I was under the blanket. That moment, I realized I was separated from my body, although my attention was drawn by something across the room. It was the skinned dog hurrying into the dining room. I followed it. When I reached the dining room, I immediately noticed her. At first, she was standing. She stood at about 5'7", was lanky with long white hair and endless wrinkles going down her gray skin. She crouched down behind the table when she saw me. She looked like a hag raven from Skyrim. As creepy as all this might sound, fear was not my first instinct. After my experience in December, I was more interested than afraid. I had done research about spirits and entities since then, and I was fully aware that I was responsible for letting them affect me. My thoughts and energy kept me safe, and as I approached the woman, I walked to the same side of the table as her. She scuttled away into the corner of the room as I approached. I chuckled and was pretentiously impressed at the strength of my astral form. I was ready to test my limits. Remembering my research on lucid dreaming, I wanted to attempt to create things in my astral form. I could have tried a million different things. I could have tried flying around Los Angeles and the Pacific Ocean. But no, I was still fucked in the head. I decided to create 2 humans and a pistol so I could kill them. I was psyched up for deployment. All I wanted to do was get my first kill. So why not do a test run? All it took was the thought. I thought it, and it transpired. I created 2 men dressed in suits and a Glock 19 in my hand. I fired 2 rounds into each man, center mass. Immediately my vision went white, blindingly so, like a flashbang in Call of Duty. I heard a voice, a loud but calm and familiar voice. All it said was, "You can't kill people in lucid dreams. You're not supposed to do it." Instantly I snapped back into my body. It was 7:30 a.m., the sun was up, and my aunt was cooking breakfast. I walked into the kitchen and saw her cooking something. I was famished and happy to finally be awake from my lucid dream. She asked me if I liked breakfast. I attempted to respond. I couldn't speak. She asks again. I tried again, no change. I put my hand to my mouth only to realize that I had no mouth. I started to violently shake and vibrate my vocal cords in an intense muffled scream. And then I awoke. Real time this time. I was back on the couch. It was dark. I sat up and looked at the clock on the DVR. It was 3:33 a.m., the hour of the devil. I understood the significance of the time and returned to sleep hastily. I left Los Angeles a week later. I went to Afghanistan in late June. I saw combat, but never killed anyone. But not for the lack of trying. I returned in 2018, and with a year left on my contract, I began to prepare for my new life. I resumed using psychedelics, but in a more responsible manner. My introspective trips rekindled my positive mindset. More importantly, though, I found love. I met her in the summer of 2018, and now we're married. I'm now pursuing a degree in philosophy, with the goal of spreading the truth of my message. We are more than a corporal mass. We are eternal beings. This reality is medium for our spirit to learn and to grow. Demonic entity attachment. The first experience I ever had with this creature clicked in my head, and it's made me shift my idea on how the entity became attached to me. At first, I believed it was because I used a Ouija board, and a few days after, I noticed the presence a lot more, but no. I have later remembered I did a guided third eye meditation, which is no longer on YouTube, and I'm glad it's not. Because if this happened to someone who wasn't as capable with energies, I would be very worried. The meditation I did was about 4.5 years ago. It was very strange. I remember laying down in my bed and listening to a voice on the video. It asked you to start breathing in a very strange way. You had to almost have a shaking breathing style and listen to audios I've never heard on any other guided or non-guided meditation, and I've participated in endless amounts of them. During the meditation, I felt and envisioned a large black hand with long nails on the left side of my chest. It felt as if I was sitting up in my bed and I could feel the hand push me gently down to the bed. I didn't want to break the meditative state, and even though my heart began to race, I continued to keep my eyes closed, and I followed till the end of the meditation, where I could hear the voice giving cues to wake up again. After sitting up, all I could see was a strange purple aura around everything I looked at. This comes into play later. After that meditation, I never really noticed the energy or the hand again, until fast forward a few years to when I used a Ouija board. A few days after using the board, I started to feel a very angry masculine presence in the far corner of my garage. The same garage I used the board in. I paid no mind, due to the fact that ever since I was a child, I've been having experiences and feeling energies. So at this point, I was accustomed to it. The energy started to become more comfortable with my presence, and I began to no longer feel that negative energy. I can feel a very heavy energy in my stomach and my chest, but it's no longer dark and negative. After a few months of feeling the presence every day, it began, for lack of better language, trying to fuck with me more in a childish yet more powerful way than I've ever felt any other energy do. This energy, I strongly believe, is the most powerful I've ever personally encountered and possibly will ever encounter. The entity would always be behind me when I was walking to the garage or to leave. Many times I would go to the open door and it would close itself. I could feel the entity behind me, and I started to talk aloud to it from then on. I don't get verbal responses that I can hear, or responses that are sometimes really at all there. It's more the entity will do something in response to my words, or will shift the energy that I'm feeling as to give a response. The entity definitely likes to use doors the best when it wants my attention, but it actually touched me like the meditation and another few times. I was with my friend at probably 2 a.m. in our small town in a grocery store, and we were on our bikes in the parking lot. We didn't want to drive since it was summers and we were just taking in the fresh air. I closed my eyes while standing in the empty parking lot. I was hovering over my bike, and my friend was beside me. All of a sudden, I felt those same black hands with sharp nails gently on my lower back. I immediately opened my eyes and looked to my friend, who could immediately see something had happened. I asked if she had touched me, which she said no, since she was beside me the whole time. She would start to sometimes feel the energies around me. One time I was driving, probably a couple of weeks after the parking lot incident, and she seen a hand come beside my face while I was driving. That same summer, we went on a trip with us and these 2 other people. There was a small pond near the Airbnb that we were staying at, and around 3 a.m. we were about to go to the pond, and one of the people we were with yelled, "Hail Satan," into the pond forested area. I told my friend after that the entity was planting the idea in my head that we shouldn't go in there. I was feeling super heavy, and as I said that, she had a look in her eyes that I won't forget. She mentioned she could see the dark entity wrapping its arms around my shoulder, as if to hold me down to not go in. When we went to the pond area, a light from a utility shed kept flashing on and off, a total of 3 separate times. My friend and I knew that we all had to pack up our stuff and leave, especially this bench that we were sitting on. We left the pond, and the next day, the other two people on the trip, who aren't very spiritual or open to it, left for the day, and my friend and I went back to the pond, and we both had an overwhelming need to, for whatever reason, go to that bench. And we noticed the bench that we were sitting on that night. It was a memorial bench, and the two others had disrespected that space. And that is why the entity was trying to get me to leave the pond that first night. Fast forward to after the summer trip, to October 2019. I started dating my significant other, and my friend from before was at my significant other's house with me and her boyfriend at the time. We were all sitting at the kitchen table, and the door behind us opened by itself. My friend looked to me and said, "Hey." So I replied, "That's not very nice, sir. Close the door." Needless to say, everybody almost died of shock when the door immediately closed. This is when I started to really know that this is an entity, and it's very real. It will do things in front of the people that I'm around, and not just in front of me. This was what really stuck in my head. Other small experiences included the shower curtain blowing open when I was showering, the screen door to my house holding open once I swung it open, and there was no wind. A door near my entryway always opens when I haven't paid much attention to the entity's presence, and it wants to remind me. When I was watching The Nun, he mimicked the hands over my face in the coffin scene to mock the Christian demons and movie, and I could go on. I think you get the idea. This entity I notice has a purple aura, which is what made me realize that it was attached to me because of that meditation. Anyways, this entity is still always around me. Just yesterday I got goosebumps and chills over my entire body when I was in a down mood, and I could feel the entity directly behind me, not trying to drain my energy, but I was feeling very alone, and it was almost like it was trying to comfort me. I've decided that I'm not going to try and cleanse this energy away, and I'll let it stay for as long as it feels like. Since I'm not being drained, it's not hurting anyone, and I see no need to detach the entity. If it doesn't want to go, and it isn't doing anything, it's fine by me. It's been attached to me fully for up to 3 years now, and it's a normal part of my life. What? Did I just see someone disappear? Background. I went to go get my flu shot from a small clinic run by a commercial lab. I was one of the few people there waiting for them to open up for those of us with nothing else better to do on a Friday night. Here's what happened. After waiting about 10 minutes, they started processing us, and I was second in line. I took note of the guy ahead of me because, unlike the rest of us, he blew past the sign that said that they weren't ready yet and took a seat inside the processing area. There was one staffer in there, and he sat straight across from her, and I thought that was slightly peculiar. But just enough to make me notice him. When I did, a couple other things stood out. He seemed nicely dressed for getting a flu shot, and was wearing a long-sleeve button-up shirt with a somewhat noisy pattern on it. Just weird in terms of level of dress, and wearing long sleeves to get a shot. I finished my quick screening, and I'm led down the hall into a room that had just been converted by adding a temporary cubicle space for shot stations. I see the guy, and he's getting his shot. It seems kind of distressed about it, and is sort of flexing his arms strangely. Some people can't take needles, though, so that's not inherently unusual. I go to the other side of the cubicle wall and get mine done like lightning. I'm up in time to start following this guy to the door, and the door that was marked with an exit. They wanted patients to leave a different route, presumably to keep up social distancing. He seemed confused for a split second, if he was going to go right or left, which way, but then he swiftly walked out the door. I followed behind, maybe 3 to 5 seconds, no more than that. I followed the very clearly marked path around the corner into a long hall. This guy must have moved very fast because I couldn't see him anywhere. But then around 2 seconds I did. He leaned very suddenly from around the corner, appearing to first look past me and then at me. He seemed nervous, but I couldn't read his facial expression well due to the mask. Just as quick, he jerked back behind the corner. I thought maybe he was lost and was just peeking around to maybe see where the others were going out. I continued walking and then get to the corner, and no one's there. Before I thought there must have been a hallway or a door there that I didn't remember. I've been to this location several times, but nope, solid white wall. The corner itself is shallow, maybe 2.5 feet deep, just wide enough to hide someone from the viewing angle that I had. There are 2 doors on that side of the hall. One just before the corner, it was very clearly shut. And locked, I would think. The other one is further down and was also shut. That door leads into a very small waiting room that was very obviously closed and very dark inside. I heard no sound during any of this. Not a footstep, not a door handle turning or a door closing. Nothing. Last night. So I used to talk on Ouija boards all the time. Been about 6 years since last time I used one. So I grew up Catholic. Did all the steps as a child to become an adult and a member of the Catholic Church. Been baptized, blessed all the time. Even had priests come to my house for dinner once a year, bless our home. Then I started using the Ouija board, and one day when I was 20 years old at my parents' house, this happened. It was fun talking on it, and I would talk on it quite often, every day just about. I met something on there that knew answers to everything. After talking on it and to that thing for a few months, it would talk to me about God. I always thought it was weird because everybody said that these are bad or evil. It would tell me how God loves me, how he protects me, how he watches over me. When it would bring God up, I would get this feeling through my whole body. It's this feeling I felt before, but not as strong as it would be coming through this board. The feel starts inside the body, and this tingling sensation feeling. Can't explain it. Sometime it would be so strong and warm feeling that it would bring me tears of joy to my eyes. It's a good feeling to feel. Always thought it was weird. I kept going to the church, and every now and then I think of God or pray and I get that feeling. Sometimes it's stronger than others. Well, it's been a few years since I've been on that Ouija board, and I don't go to church really anymore. I felt that feeling a few times, but last night I got a notification like a suggested page that I'd like on Reddit. It was a Ouija board experience thread. As I was reading and posting about my experiences, I have a rosary hanging on my wall. The rosary bounced off the wall, long, and was banging against the wall like it was swinging. This has never happened before. Like, how did it do that? It's been hanging there for a long time and never moves. And now it banged against the wall, swinging back and forth. Not only that, but I got this weird feeling and sensation, and it was strong, a real one, and it overpowered my body and made me cry again. I really can't explain it. As I talk about it or write this, happens a couple times, not strong, just a light version. Has anyone else ever experienced this feeling I'm talking about? I always think it's God protecting me, or talking to me, or loving me. It's hard to explain. The only reason I stopped talking on the Ouija board is because it kept telling me not to talk on it, because God didn't want me on it, and just things about God and plans that he has for me, and not to get on this. And every time I say the same thing, God don't want you on this, so I stopped getting on it. I don't use Reddit, but I need some answers. For around a year now, I've been hearing a lot of sounds at night, and when I'm alone in my house. My room becomes freezing cold when the rest of my upstairs stays warm. My room is always very hot, and getting the feeling that I'm being watched. Now, I'm a skeptic, and I don't really believe in anything after death. So, normally, when weird things happen, I can connect sounds and things moving to the house as settling. Or, I must have just moved it but forgot about it, kind of things. But there are many things that I cannot explain. I've woken up multiple times to shit in the room next to mine going crazy, and my dog staring at my door confused and scared. Every time this happens, I check my phone, and it's always between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. But I don't want to get onto those stories now. I want to talk about what happened today. So my family left and I was home alone, me and my dog. We were sitting on the sofa watching some TV. Then I hear a wow from upstairs. Me and my dog make a what the fuck was that eye contact, but then a thought came into my mind that said, oh, my brother's still here. Maybe he just hadn't heard my parents on the VR. So I get up to go tell him that everyone left. Walking upstairs, I realized that no one was on the VR because the light were off and you need the light for the sensors to work. So I looked around for a bit and to make sure that it wasn't a prank, then gotten an idea. I've been watching a lot of ghost hunting shit because I'm bored as fuck. So I say, why don't I go do an EVP session, see if anything happens? So I got my phone turned on, start hitting record and begin asking questions. I asked, did you make that wow noise? What is your name? Are you scared? Nothing happened when I asked, but the recording, there were a lot of bangs that I didn't hear. But I thought nothing was happening, so I asked if it could make another noise or a bang on the wall. Then I hear a small thud from my brother's room. Go over to look at the room, there's nothing there. So, me weirded out, I thought that this was just lucky timing, so I left the room and asked it again. And it happened again. I run into the room, looked underneath the bed in the crawl space, and found nothing and no one. It likes the kitchen. When you walk into my kitchen at night, a gut-wrenching, menacingly sinking feeling hits you with an unexplainable force. It sticks with you the whole time you're in there, and leaves the moment that you're out. Late last year, I began to pay attention to this feeling and its patterns. I never really thought about the paranormal. I wasn't a skeptic, really. It just didn't cross my mind. Ever. So, when I discovered how in touch I am with paranormal beings, it really changed my perspective on things. As I got more and more in touch, I realized there was a presence in my kitchen. It only came out at night, for the feeling brought along with it was sort of only there at the time. It had the same schedule every day. Around 9 o'clock every night it showed up, staying until early morning around 7 a.m. I figured the spirit, though I sensed it to be dark, wasn't going to change its habits anytime soon. I tried my best to become more accustomed to it. Looking back, I now understand. I never quite could. One night around 2 in the morning, I grabbed my water bottle and walked my way downstairs. My eyes were adjusted to the dark, and I took quiet, slow steps down the old carpet-covered staircase. Here I must explain a bit of the layout, and I hope it makes decent sense. Upstairs are 4 doors. On one side there's a hall leading to the bathroom, and just before it, a door to the bedroom. On the other side are 2 doors at a corner. Each lead to a separate bedroom, and mine is the one facing the previously mentioned door on the other side of the hall. A staircase in the middle of this hall descends down halfway and then takes a sharp 180-degree turn fully down to the first floor. An open layout lays at the bottom. The kitchen sits in front of you, and that's to the left, in almost a pocket. To the right is a wide living room. With that out of the way, I'll get to the second to the bottom step and look at the kitchen. The side of the refrigerator sticks out, causing it to be visible from the stairs. It's the type with a water dispenser on it. I freeze. Right below the dispenser, I'm met with a face. Something is hunched over in an awkward crouch, staring at me with eyes I'll never be able to forget. The whites of them glow slightly, making this shadowy figure all that much more disturbing looking. I reach my hand out and turn on the light for the stairs. It's gone. I stare, unable to fully process what I've just witnessed. Was I going crazy? Perhaps I just was too tired. I didn't feel tired, though, and deep down I knew I was fully awake. I walked to my fridge hesitantly, that overwhelming familiar feeling I've mentioned hitting me once more. I fill my water bottle and I leave. The feeling does not go away. Never in the time I've lived in this house has this happened. The feeling, the presence had always only stuck to the kitchen. It was impossible, I thought. Yet here it was, following me up the stairs and down the hall to my room. I'm struck with dooming fear. Without thinking, I rushed into my room, repeating in my head and aloud that whatever this was that was with me was forbidden to enter my room. Slamming the door, I rushed to my bed and processed what had happened, feeling the presence lighten. What did happen? I don't know. I couldn't think. How could I? What was I to do? From that night on, I noticed a break of pattern. The presence moved around, appearing visually more and more. It stood at the bottom of the stairs, then the center, then the top. Finally, it moved to the right outside of my door. Currently, it is moving once again, and I'm unable to confidently pinpoint where its new place is. I'm scared to say this, but I believe it's in my closet. I have many stories of my house. I see shadow creatures often, and I feel and hear their presences. I've lurked in this subreddit for a while, and finally felt like posting an experience of my own. This is short and somewhat poorly written. It's not so bad. I must apologize for that. But I hope to post more about my house and its activity, along with my experiences, more often. I'll mention this quickly. I experience a lot of activity partially because I'm very sensitive, but also because demons, and like spirits, easily and they're attached to me. They make my life interesting, that's for sure. A nighttime walker. I used to walk a lot at night with my older brother. We lived in a small mountain town in 2003 and felt comfortable going for walks around the neighborhood in the dark, especially in the summer. Before this night, did I always believe in ghosts? Not really. I've always been easily scared, but that's due to watching far too many horror movies at a young age, never from seeing or feeling a presence. This moment stands in my head so clear still. We were only a few blocks from home, just reached the peak of a slight hill with the streetlight shining its orange glow around us and the Italian cypress trees all in a row on the opposite side of us in the road. My brother was on the left, I was on his right, and we were on the right side of the road. I was talking away, my hand gestures expressive as always, looking toward my brother when I suddenly grabbed onto him jokingly and whispered for him in kind of a shush-hush voice. Not that he was talking, that a person was nearby and could hear us. For there, just opposite us, across the street, a teenage boy in a striped shirt was walking along with us in one of the cypress tree shadows. I don't even think my brother looked. He may have kept his eyes straight, concerned a stranger at night had crept up on us. Stranger though, the moment that teenager in his striped shirt hit the cast of the street light behind the trees, he disappeared. I stopped in my spot, so excited at what just happened. This person, ghost, was gone. Gone immediately after I had just seen them. My brother was unfazed. He didn't see anything. He didn't believe in ghosts. A few years later, maybe more, as I walked by a car window, kind of caught my reflection, I pondered on why it made me think back to that summer. The teenage boy in that striped shirt. He had been like a reflection in clear glass, there but not whole. My mom would hear someone call her name from outside. My mom hasn't talked about this experience for quite some time, but recently she mentioned it with a bit more detail. For some background info. We've lived in our house for maybe 20 years now. It's pretty old, and a few of my uncles plus other relatives have lived here also. Some of them claimed that our house was haunted, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, I wasn't born yet, so sorry if this next part's brief. As I mentioned before, I still don't know all the details. My mom worked the night shift, so she'd been home alone throughout the day mostly. She said this started one day when she was cleaning. She suddenly heard someone call out her name from the direction of our backyard. She glanced out the window, but didn't see anyone. She then heard someone call out again, this time from the front yard. She decided not to look out a window this time, because she now understood that whatever was out there wasn't good. Mom's not real religious, but she learned from her grandfather to always trust in God. So she began to recite a short prayer. Then she heard the voice again, this time as she showered. She said she felt afraid and noticed that it sounded like a woman's voice. She began to pray again. This next one's the scariest of her experiences, in my opinion. She was lying in bed one afternoon, but she couldn't sleep. She had her eyes closed. Then suddenly she felt like something was looming over her. She ignored the feeling and tried to go back to her nap. Then suddenly she felt a warm tongue lick all over her cheek. All of it. Obviously at that moment she was terrified. She opened her eyes and saw a black dog, about the height of a bed, standing there panting. She closed her eyes, cried, and again began to ask God for help. I'm not sure, but I think that she said that eventually she didn't feel that dog there anymore, but she still kept crying. Having strange feelings about my apartment. I recently moved into an old brownstone in Brooklyn, New York. The building is pre-war, over 100 years old. When I first moved in, little stuff started happening, mostly doors opening and closing, which my roommate and I would pass off as the building being old. recently I've been having feelings like there's another person in my apartment. Specifically when I walk from the living area to the kitchen, which is basically just a hallway in those 2 rooms. I get this feeling like someone is going to be in either room when I walk in. If I'm standing in the kitchen or cooking or whatever, I tend to turn around and assume that my roommate or boyfriend is there with me. But there's no one there. That happens kind of often. Like, I'll literally start forming a smile and would go to say something to them but realize I'm alone. Last week I was doing dishes when I heard someone humming. I shut the water and gave another listen, and I distinctly heard in a humming, higher-pitched voice. It was just me in the apartment at this point. It didn't freak me out, but certainly caught me off guard. I told my roommate, who confirmed that she was on the phone with her dad, which I couldn't hear through the wall anyway. Which brings me to yesterday when I spoke to my landlord about my experience. His wife asked me if I was empathic. I'm a social worker and a therapist, so I do have a high emotional intelligence and read people fairly quickly. I just told her what I feel when I was in the kitchen and living room areas of the apartment. Y'all, they proceeded to tell me how they had a previous tenant in my apartment who frequently saw a woman walking from one of those rooms, and they themselves have felt cold breezes between that area as well. We all agreed that it's not a bad or a creepy feeling, but it catches you off guard. Before I sat down to write this, I was making coffee in the kitchen when I heard a loud woman sigh. I don't know, y'all. I've never really experienced something like this, so any advice on how to not get creeped out would be great. I also feel like my roommate doesn't really believe me. That's the end of today's stories. And just to let you guys know that we are listening back to you guys as you listen to us, the next story that I read, probably tomorrow, I'm going to heed some of your advice. And you did apologize for being blunt, so apology accepted. We're going to try the next reading less, as you say, quote-unquote, Valley Girl. Ouch, that stung. I've heard a lot of them talk, and I'll tell you, I too don't enjoy this. However, when one reads question marks in writing, you tend to make the voice somewhat more, questioning sounding. However, I would like to give you guys something nice to listen to. So, upon the next reading, we're going to try this with a more somber tone. So, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. See ya. Step into the shadows of the unexplored with Paranormal M. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for our latest tales that will leave you pondering the mysteries of the universe. I saw a shadow entity, made 4 cars' lights flicker near it. In a town near Portland, Oregon, at about 7 or 8 p.m. on an overcast dark night in 2006, I saw a shadowy entity in the driveway across the street. I was playing World of Warcraft at the time. I recall I was playing my warlock, and I was in Shotrath City. I had positioned my computer so the window out of my second-story room was looking down the T of my neighborhood because I liked the view. I saw a flicker in my eye. I looked across the street to the driveway of my neighbor's house. They had 4 cars in the driveway when they normally only had 1 or 2. And only the porch light was on, not the driveway floodlight that they had above the garage door. I was a 2-car garage with cement stairs leading up to the left of the driveway to the main door. I saw something moving between the cars, but I couldn't make out any limbs or identifying features because it was so dark. In this area at night, when it's overcast, it gets extremely dark. almost pitch black, so it wasn't strange to me that I couldn't identify it. It just seemed like a person walking between the cars. Seemed average person height, at least. Well, then it sped up. Across maybe 5 seconds or so, went from walking speed to running speed, to maybe 30-ish miles an hour, zooming around all 4 cars in the driveway before it disappeared entirely. When it started speeding up to about bike riding speed, all of the lights started flickering in all of the cars. These were older cars. I recall an old maroon 4-door Civic-like car, not a car I would expect to have a fob or ability to flash like it was when it was off. Even the floodlight above the garage was flickering, lighting up the entire area. This thing was moving so fast I couldn't tell what it was, but it just was a shadow. Even with light, I couldn't see anything but blackness. Then the house lights, even inside the house, all of the lights flickered, not unison at all, for a solid 2-ish seconds before everything just clicked back to normal and it was done. I stared for a while after that. Nothing. I have no explanation, and to this day, I regret never going over there and asking the neighbors if they saw anything too. I didn't know them, and I was only about 16 at the time. I just told my mom, who told me weird stuff happens here. I went on to get a bachelor's in physics, actually, to see if I could find anything that made sense to fit my new worldview. And that was basically one big intro to a whole lot more questions than I'd ever anticipated having. I've thought through a multitude of possibilities, the most logical being a hallucination. But to my knowledge, I've never hallucinated before, then or since. Nor did anyone else around me hallucinate or have any strange symptoms, so I rule out carbon monoxide poisoning. I see other people stating that they've seen shadow people, but I'm not sure this was a person. Definitely don't know if it had a hat or was indeed the Hat Man. And it seems normal accounts of shadow people have then not zooming around and making lights flicker. And now I'm a father, have a wonderful wife and a great job, but this still takes up immense real estate in my head. Any direction or insight would be appreciated. Would particularly like to hear about or speak with others who have seen similar things. The Attic Picture. For some backstory, I used to live in this house for about 11 years. Once I had asked my mom if she had seen, heard, or experienced things in there. She told me that up in the attic, when her and my dad, were first moving in, she went in to store some things up there and noticed this weird door made of plywood. She opened it, and lo and behold, a small mattress that looked like it was for a child. Then she discovered a picture of a girl hanging from a single nail above the mattress. She examined the photo, and there was nothing written on the back of it, and nothing to indicate the time period except the girl's appearance. I still haven't been able to figure this out. And that was that, the whole story. Today, though, I went up to see for myself. See, I've been wanting to see this for about a year, and I got my chance today. The deal for the house closes on Friday, since it's currently on the market, and has a full offer put in. I went up with my dad and sister to see if we could find anything. We went into the small room, and I did see the tiny mattress. It was old and stained, and you could see the springs through the thin material. We looked around for about 10 minutes, and my main focus was on the picture. I eventually found it, but it wasn't hanging on the nail my mom described. It was right outside the small room on the floor. I picked it up and exclaimed, and carried it back downstairs. I had taken it outside with the intention of taking it to my current house, but I decided to put it back because it felt wrong to take it. Like something was telling me it was wrong. So I took some pictures of it and put it gently back on the attic steps. I said something along the lines of, "Here's your picture back, I'm sorry I took it," and then went back outside and got in the truck. When we got home, I was worried about something happening that correlated with the picture. So I thoroughly washed my hands. Then later, I deleted the pictures off my phone after I had shown some close friends that I'd previously told this story to. This wouldn't be as creepy, but my mom also told me about how she would find me in my room at that old house when I was small, and it appeared like I was talking to no one. She would ask me who I was talking to. I would say, "I'm talking to Lisa." Now, I don't know what to make of this, but if this is the little girl I used to play with as a little kid, what do I do? I'm worried about residual energy and something following me. The spirit that made me into a believer 19 years ago. This experience took place from 2003 to 2007, and because I was born in 1998, you should be able to understand that I'll do my best to give you a full in-depth recollection of this ghost. The only people I will mention that should appear in this post are my mother and my brother, who in the beginning is not yet born. He was born in 2004, so initially it is only my mother and I. A long time ago in my hometown, my mother and I moved into a duplex, where the landlord lived upstairs and we lived downstairs. This house, as I remember it, was older, but must have been remodeled because it looked very 2000s and not from the late 19th century. We had a front porch and a decent-sized backyard with a fireplace in the center of it. About as big as the yard can get in an urban in the middle of our street home. Now, for the layout of this duplex. I wasn't there when the moving of this furniture took place. I actually hung out with my aunt or my guardian. But the moment I stepped into our new home, I was excited. Excited to get on my CTR TV in all honesty. But anyways, when you first walk into this house, you'll find that our dinner table is directly to the right of the front door. Looking forward was the living room. The CTR TV sat on the floor like those models usually could. The couch was to the left wall. Farther back from the front door to the other side of the duplex was my slide door to the backyard. And to the left of that door, the computer and the desk against the left wall. Behind the couch was like some kind of counter. The wall was cut out to give you a view of the kitchen. To the right of that, the actual entrance to the kitchen. The kitchen was how you got to the 2 bedrooms, closet, and the bathroom. In fact, all of those rooms were connected. My bedroom and my mom's bedroom had no door, so you could always see what each other was doing. I had the closet that had the door to the bathroom. The bathroom having a closet door and a kitchen door. I do remember how everything else was laid out, but let me not bore you too hard. 2003. Finally, to the thing you're reading this for. The second thing I did after settling down into my new home was look out the sliding door to the backyard almost instantaneously, this experience introduces you to her. I don't have a name for her. She, the spirit, never said her name, nor do I remember what the history of the duplex said online. I thought nothing of the girl. I saw her staring down at the fireplace, and I remember that she was wearing something and what she looked like to this day. I don't remember her face, only her scar that I will reveal to you soon. She didn't turn around, so at this time, I never had seen her face. As she stared down at the fireplace unmoving, the sun reflected off her gorgeous golden hair, and she was wearing some kind of white dress. To be honest, that feels like a common thing with female spirits and dresses, doesn't it? The dress was gently being brushed by the wind. It was afternoon. The sun was high in the sky at this time, and yet, there she was. Little did 5 or 6-year-old me realize that she wasn't actually live or there. Little did I realize, but would soon learn that she was more than what she seemed. I think I asked my mother who she was. Mom would always ask me who I was talking about. She couldn't see her, yet I could. Every day, she would be there by the fireplace, in the same position all morning, staring at this fireplace. I never thought of approaching her for some reason, but I've been in the backyard plenty of times, and whenever I did go back there, she wasn't there. This next bit, I'm not sure if it was before my brother was born or after. But, because I actually have no memory of my brother during this moment, it had to be before. One day I was sitting at home by myself in the living room. It was the weekend, and my mom was working. So I decided to make a bowl of cereal and almost turn on the TV when suddenly out of nowhere, my soul is startled by the sound of a very loud robot voice that spoke an entire sentence. My thoughts were everywhere, scrambling to try to understand what I heard. Our landlord was quiet, pretty much never home, so I know it couldn't have come from upstairs. I merely remember that this great and powerful voice was all around me. Maybe it was in my head. I'm not sure, but she randomly entered into my thoughts. I somehow felt that her and that this one-timer voice were connected. I would never hear the deep electronic voice ever again. 2004 is when things started becoming increasingly real. 2004. This is the year where my brother would be born in October. So I have a few things I can recollect that I know for sure happened in this year. I feel that the activity increased throughout the years. By the time we moved out, she could do anything and has done a lot. 2004. What a year of nostalgia for me. I was as much of a gamer then as I am now at 23 years old. Although back then I would actually watch TV. My favorite show was, funny enough, Ghost Hunters. Today I don't really like or think that show is real, but back then I did. And she, my friendly ghost with no name, put fuel to that fire. There was this one day, sun out, and all where Mom was sitting in the living room. I could in fact see her head over the counter thing in the kitchen. I pulled out my back then childhood board game, Sorry, and said out loud, setting up in the middle of the kitchen floor, "Who wants to play a board game with me?" I'm not sure why I used who rather than do you, when the only person there, other than I, was my mother. She was talking about her CNA job with someone on her phone, so she was not listening to me. However, a voice of a young girl said something to the left side of me. To the left of me was the refrigerator, and to the front of the refrigerator was the entrance to my mother's bedroom. This voice said in a playful tone, "I do." I was fascinated, not frightened at all for some reason. To hear a voice coming from nowhere and pushing it off as a normal thing, I might add. "Okay," I said. "You go first." I pulled a card out for the voice, and I watched, and I waited. The card was an 8, and I gave the spirit the green pieces while I was red. Of course, and much to my disappointment, the green pieces did not move at all. They had to be moved by me. I ended up playing an entire game of Sorry by myself, feeling a very cold air around me. Again, I thought absolutely nothing of it. My mom eventually got up from the couch and went to the fridge to get something from it. That was when the cold air dissipated. I don't remember if my mom and I conversed, but eventually that night, things would change forever in that apartment. Night came, and I was sleeping soundly well into my dream world. I should say that this memory is very foggy, and I'm going to try to do my best to make sense of the conclusion of it. My dream was very abnormal. Everything around me fogged like an old Silent Hill video game, hiding the surroundings in a creepy, empty void. I was in my bed in the dream, and she, the blonde girl, was sitting in that gray void next to the bed. Her face was blurry as hell, but I knew something was wrong with it. Her hair was parted, and I don't actually think she had eyes. She was pale and looked like she sat in a fire. Her skin was covered in burns. She was sitting on her legs with a very friendly smile across her lips. "Hi, would you like me to read you a story?" she asked me. Then immediately began reading to me something from Mother Goose. She never gave me a glance to respond to her question. The entire dream went on like this. Her voice faded out slowly, and before I knew it, I would be awake again the following morning. Apparently, as I was sleeping, I got up out of bed and asked my mother about her. I described the girl to my mom, and everything. Yet, I remembered none of that. I was sleepwalking, both dreaming of the girl reading a book to me, while my body got up to tell my mother about the ghost. My mother brought it up to me eventually, and for some reason, I was confused as to what she was talking about. It was almost as if I completely forgot about the girl ghost. The next incident is a repetitive nuisance. Anytime Mom and I returned home, the living room TV remote would be laying face down in the center of the room, with the back cover missing, and a AA battery hidden in 2 places. We'd have to find them every single time. I wonder what my mother thought about all of this. I can only tell you in depth that my brother and myself. I think my mom must have been trying to make sense of the remote situation. Maybe she blamed it on me. Maybe she had incidents that I don't know about and didn't want to scare me. The remote game, as I called it on for months, it would finally stop once my brother was born. This is when things got even more real. I would have urges of jealousy and eagerness. I'd bring a butter knife in hand to try to suffocate my brother, and I loved the kid so much I can't explain why I would make such violent attempts. I would stop myself before I did anything. I don't actually remember grabbing the knife, ever in fact. My brother was never harmed, but the spirit girl had plans with him. For a while, the house was quiet. Time passes. I do not recall any more incidents for 2004. 2005. I can basically sort out these memories through the video games I played. This year was when Star Wars Battlefront 2 was released, though I was playing quite a lot of Star Wars Bounty Hunter and Destroy All Humans. My brother, who I will, for the sake of naming him, we'll call him Austin. He was becoming talkative and still in a crib at the time of this next incident. This incident consisted of a second dream that signaled the return of her. She was not absent long since that last incident I described. This time she was going to be moving things and people while you were there, and you could see it in your peripherals. She would talk a lot more, but I could no longer see her in 2005. In fact, she ditched me for my brother to become his imaginary friend. The first incident of 2005. She appeared in my dreams to read me, the itsy-bitsy spider, but my brother was there next to me. My bed was outside in the backyard, and she was sitting in the middle of the fireplace, reading to both of us. The second incident initiates her power. I was sitting in my bed in pitch black. My mom's room, which I'm able to see from my bed, had my brother's crib around the corner, just on the other side of the wall of my bed. I'm sitting there trying to sleep, when all of a sudden, I hear footsteps from the kitchen to my brother's crib. I watch, fixing my eyes and adjusting to the dark. There was absolutely no one there. I then heard something dragging and a thud. Out came my already walking brother, who had no way of getting out of the crib. It was too high for him to do so. So, walked up to me, not creeped out at all compared to me, speaking gibberish. I went to tell Mom that Austin got out of his crib somehow. She told me to get back to bed, since she'll take care of him. Creeped out, I remained in bed staring at my ceiling for a while. I made friends with my next-door neighbor in 2005. His name was Isaiah, but he never really experiences any of these incidents with me. If he has, I don't know about it. I only mention him to bring up his house sitting to the right of my house. I was social for a time, and being quite the daredevil. At night was when the spirit would do things in front of me. One in particular was my brother in that little jumper thing babies sit in and walk around in. Note that somehow he walked to my side of the bed that night, yet he can't really walk like that. He was bouncing around and beating up all of the spinning circles, pressing buttons, dancing to the audio music, when suddenly I noticed that he got real quiet. I was playing Pac-Man World 2 in my mom's bedroom while he was in the kitchen. So right outside the doorway, he was staring at about my height, but nowhere in my direction. He was looking to the small open space to the left of the refrigerator and talking. Austin was laughing and talking gibberish with someone that he thought was there. Mom noticed this too, and we were like, "Austin, who are you talking to?" He would do this for a while. He actually got out of his crib one more time eventually this year. But I'm not sure when that was. But I remember carrying him and barely being able to lift him over the corner of the crib onto it. I have one more thing in 2005, and honestly, I think this is probably the coolest incident I have of a spirit. It was nighttime, and I was playing Star Wars Bounty Hunter. My mom's bed had a little lamp on the left side of it, Out of my peripherals, I saw the corner of her bed's blanket lift up into the air and drop back down when I attempted to directly look at what in blazes was going on. Again, I was thrilled rather than chilled. If I were to guess what the ghost girl was doing, she was probably laying in my mom's bed to watch my brother in his crib. At this point, I no longer hear or see her, so I can only make guesses of where she's standing, based on peripheral sightings, or what my brother was up to. My brother was sleeping when this happened. 2006. There is not much that I can remember of this year, but I could ask my brother about his experiences eventually. I remember at least two things. One of them was how I was having emotions that were not my own. I'd be stuck in trances. There is no known order of events of this year. The closet that connects my bedroom to the bathroom was a point of interest this year for me. Something always told me that whenever my nose bled, or if I bled anywhere at all, to wipe it all over the walls of the closet. At night, I felt like someone was watching me from the keyhole. One day, I suddenly felt so depressed and aimless that I took a stool and stared at the oven clock for about 5 hours straight. Neither Mom or Austin was home, so I was left there uninterrupted. My thoughts were creepy. I was remembering a fire, yet I never experienced a fire as big as I was imagining. 2007. Austin is talking great by now. I began hearing laughter and footsteps in my mom's bedroom, and Austin would sleep in the same bed as Mom. The crib was removed at this point, and the TV in the bedroom area was moved at least 3 times. That TV was new at the time, yet there was a day where I was playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, 2003. The TV was sitting on the floor next to Mom's bed, and I sat right in front of it. The TV turned itself off. I heard the button clank and everything, so I turned the TV back on. I continue to play the game, and the TV does the same thing. It turns off, and the sound of the button on the TV being pressed can be heard. I sat there and grumbled. I turned the TV on again, and I sit there and watch the power button of the TV waiting for it to turn off again. Sure thing, I see the button being pushed into the TV. The loud click sound these old CRTV buttons had, and the static of the TV screen dissolving. I never left a bedroom so fast. The TV remote throughout this year would get thrown around, and I was able to see the ghost girl again. Austin and I saw her staring at the backyard fireplace. One night we had people over and had a bonfire, and I remember seeing the spirit hovering in a tree branch above us, staring at the fire. Do you remember when I said that she looked like she was burned alive in that dream a few years back? Her dress was now dirty, and her face was not blurry anymore. I couldn't make out any facial features. Eventually, my mom would look up the history of this apartment. At some point in the 1900s, the duplex was set on fire, and this girl my brother and I always saw was caught in the middle of it. She passed away in either the bedroom or the living room. My friend next door and I started not to get along, and before any of that got worse, my mom, my brother, and I moved out. The day came where we'd see that house one last time. Mom pulled out of the driveway, and Austin and I were in the back seat. On our porch, I saw her again. She had her hand on the railing watching us drive off. I asked Mom, "Is she coming with us?" My mom, scared by my question, responded with, "Hell no, she isn't," and sped away. 2 years later, my friend's house would mysteriously be set on fire from the side of their house facing the duplex. My friend's house was completely destroyed. I believe that duplex is still there to this day. In fact, I'm going to go look it up on Google Maps in a minute. Random clapping sounds in my house. Just for context, my wife and I have lived in our house for almost 10 years. During a majority of this time, we've had 0 paranormal experiences. About half a year ago, my mother-in-law passed away. She was really close with my wife, and obviously had been hard on her. Since her passing, a few odd things have happened. A knocking here and there, but quite enough to disregard as being something other than paranormal. The sound of doors closing gently, which had never happened before, but we just assumed it was heating and cooling. Partially open door, perhaps. Which we've never seen, heard, or witnessed happen. But we just debunked the most weird occurrences to something other than paranormal. My first major experience was when my wife was out of town for work about a year ago. I had video called my wife, and we talked about it for half an hour. She decided she was going to bed. I decided to make Jack a Coke and relax for a bit before I went to bed. So I made my drink, and while I'm stirring it up, the shot glass slides about 8 inches across the counter. There was no water or alcohol on the counter that could be assisted it to being slid. I tried to recreate it, to no avail. So, officially spooked a bit, I had to call my wife back. She calmly says, "My mom must just be hanging out with you having a drink." I kind of felt honored that she'd hang out with me, and just went along with it and tried to enjoy my drink. So over the next year or so, the same sounds kept happening, but nothing like the shot glass. Until about a few weeks ago. It was about p.m., and my 14-year-old daughter was over for the weekend. I was showing her our newly remodeled bathroom, which was down the hallway from our kitchen, maybe 20 to 30 feet, and we heard a loud clap sound, and my wife says, "The fuck was that?" So we come out to see what happened, and she initially assumed that it was me sneaking up behind her and clapping. But I assured her that we were both in the bathroom, not anywhere in the proximity of where we heard the clap. We were all kind of in shock. We all heard it loud and clear. We were all standing around talking about it, and then all of a sudden there's another loud clap which sounded like it was just a few feet away from my head, and in between where my daughter and I were standing. I physically felt the vibrations in the air. We were all stunned again and in disbelief about it. We all just kind of joked that it was my mother-in-law letting us know that she's still around us or something like that. Now it's been a few weeks. I've had no new occurrences or sounds, till about 45 minutes ago. My wife was in the garage and heard another loud clap. The garage door was closed. Everyone in the house. She was all alone. I heard the clap from inside the house, but just assumed that it was her making it somehow. She came inside and told me that she heard the clap again, and I told her I had heard it as well. Definitely something paranormal in my opinion. But has anyone had something similar to this? Would love to hear your experiences or opinions. Haunted house with whistling. So I just discovered this sub, and I really want to share this somewhat short story. Back in the summer of 2016, as a teen, I went with a family friend to their home in China, specifically Tianjin. Note that they are wealthy and the home was very large. In the first few nights while in bed, I heard whistling sounds around the house, but chalked it up to my friend's family just making a tune. The whistling tune occurred every 1 or 2 minutes to an hour and was made up of 2 notes, a higher note and a lower note that prolonged a bit. A few more days in, I was home alone due to a family needing to attend the emergency, and I heard the whistling again, and happened at different areas of the house. I was too scared to go outside my room to check, so I waited till morning. I checked everywhere around the house, but it just doesn't make sense as to what can make that whistling sound that can occur all around the house. Then, my breaking point. As I was packing up my stuff to go see family in Hong Kong on the next day, I heard the whistling again, but next to my ear, when I was in the pitch-dark stairway. My goodness. I hurried to the living room, turned on the TV to watch some random movie on full blast. I think it was Judge Dredd, LOL, and just sat still for a while. I said fuck it to the rest of my packing and just decided to wait till morning on the couch and GTFO to the airport. About a couple of weeks later, I came back a bit nervous, but felt a bit better as my friends and their family are back, so I could ignore the situation. I took a nap after the long travel and experienced the worst nightmare I ever had. I still remember it quite vividly. Basically, it was my relatives, all as undead demons, and I was being chased, but could not escape. To this day, this was my creepiest experience. And someone who tends to not be superstitious, I believe those events were horrifyingly paranormal. Dreaming a friend contacted me. I'm going to start this out really blunt, and I'm sorry for that, but there's really no other way for me to start it. I have a friend that died a few years ago. He and I used to be very close. Our main forms of contact was always texts and messages on Facebook before Messenger, or calls because we lived in different states. He helped me through a lot. We grew apart, due to being on different paths. He was an active duty military. I became a mom and got married. But we always touched base with each other occasionally. He died in 2017. A few months later, I got a notification on my phone that his name had joined Messenger saying hi. That stupid Messenger notification you get when somebody downloads it. I went straight into a panic attack brought on by grief. I rationalized it away as maybe his fiancée or his parents had downloaded it to check his messages or something. Last year in October, I had a dream. I was on my phone. Weird, because I never see phone calls in my dreams. And I got a message notification with the little picture bubble and everything. Him. Hey, just checking in. How are you doing? Me. What? What's going on? This has to be a joke. Who is this? Him. It's me. What are you talking about? How are you doing? How are the kids? Side note, I only had one child when he was alive. Second was born about 1.5 years after he died. Me. You're doing good. I still don't understand. Him. I gotta go check. I'll check again later. Needless to say, I was all kinds of freaked out. I don't know if it was wishful thinking or he actually visited me, but I feel and hope that it was actually visitation. Little stories about my paranormal experience in my old house. Not really scary. When I was a little kid, between the ages of 5 and 6, I think, me and my family lived in a pink house in a little quarter sack in Apex, North Carolina. The house was built on a cemetery. The builders moved the tombs, but not the bodies. I don't know why. Now, I don't have any memories about the house, so my parents told me stories when we lived there. Story 1. The Greedy Children. This story is very short, but my father told me that the 2 children would take me and my sister's toys. So, this happened when a babysitter came to look after us. Me and my sister went to play in the room up in the attic. When my father came back home, he said that he found us arguing with someone. When he asked us who we were talking to, we said, "The children won't let us play with our toys." Story 2. The Man at My Bedside. So me and my sister slept in the same room in a bunk bed. My mom and dad said that I would wake up and I would tell them that there was a man who sat at the end of my bed. Now this would happen often, but not too often. I don't remember the man, but still gave me chills sometimes. Story 3. Paintings and Children. My house had a hall where we would hang up paintings. My dad said that sometimes they would just plop off. This went off very often. My dad also said that he heard someone running up and down the hall. To him, they sounded like children playing. Mirror in the bathroom. My mom and dad were sleeping when the mirror in the bathroom fell down and crashed. Now this sounds normal, like it could have been loose or something. But, according to my parents, the mirror fell and was through out of the bathroom, then crashed. Story number 5. Mom? Very short, but I remember when I was falling asleep, I saw an outline of a woman leaving my bedroom. I called out to the outline saying, "Mom," but it didn't respond. I simply shrugged it off and went to bed. Story 6. Lady in Red. My father told me this story. So one night my dad and his aunt were watching a movie and drinking wine. My dad said that he heard something behind him, so he turned around and saw a lady walking down the staircase. According to him, the lady wore a very fluffy scarf and had a long casier in her mouth. The lady looked at them and said, "Get out," then walked through the floor. His aunt was very concerned, and my dad just said, "Just keep drinking." When I was growing up, there was one door in my childhood home, built in 1872, that had a strange, bright static-like sparkle on it. What was it? Probably best to prefix this with the fact that I'm not a believer. However, there are some things in my life, most of which happened in this house, that I cannot explain. This being one of them, and peculiar as it happened many times from ages 5 to 17. A static-like sparkle existed on a single bedroom door. It was about 50 centimeters high, 30 centimeters wide, existed on the top half of the door, and looked like television static but whiter and softer. As I walked into the room, the sparkle on the right side of me, and I exited the room, it was on the left side of me. So it was on a fixed point of the door, and not in my eye, so to speak. It would only exist in my peripheral, and disappeared if I looked at it directly. However, it would still be there in my peripheral when I turned my head back. To me, it looked like an artist's depiction of energy. I often thought about reaching out and touching it, but never found the courage due to the stories of negative paranormal activity of this house. The reason the previous owner had moved. The sparkle would come and go over the years, staying for a week or two and then disappearing. Until I got to about 14, and then it became a memory. As I entered adulthood, I always thought about the strange sparkle as the room with the door became my bedroom. Then, when I was 17, now feeling like a rational human, the sparkle returned. It actually panicked me, and I even moved rooms. I moved out of the house entirely not too long after that, but never got an answer as to what it was. But it is still something I think about every few months, and something as I get older only leaves me with more questions. My paranormal experiences as a kid. So this took place about 20 years ago. I was 7 at the time, and my family, consisting of my mom, her boyfriend, and my sister, had just moved into a new house. It was located just outside of a suburb, so we had neighbors within walking distance, and civilization was just a 5-minute drive away. This was a pretty big house. Downstairs was the living room, kitchen, bathroom, dinner room, and a small room for the washing machine. Upstairs was 3 bedrooms and a small bathroom. One last thing. It's important to know that when you walked into the house, the staircase would be immediately to your right, and you could see the walkway that led to the bedrooms. It all started with my mom. She was working nights, so there were several days per week that she had off, so she was often alone in the house during the days. One day she had done some laundry and was carrying it into my room, which was the biggest room in the house, located at the far left of the upstairs hallway. She put my clothes in a closet, closed it, and walked away. But as she reached the doorstep, the closet opened. Confused, she went back and closed it, but still the same result. Although this was a closet door where you had to twist the handle and pull for it to open, she didn't think much of it. But this kept happening almost every time that she went into my room. On top of this, she started to feel this intense feeling of someone watching her in there. As soon as she stepped foot into my room, an immense pressure came over her chest, and all she could think about was how to get out of the room. She later told me that she would sometimes wait with whatever business she had there until someone else was home. And apparently, she had told friends how she was not comfortable with me sleeping in that room. Then we have little old me. My mom didn't tell me any of her experiences as I was a young lad, and she did not want to frighten me. But I had also started to feel the same feeling that she had. Neither creepypastas or YouTube were a thing when I had not started watching horror movies, so I had a hard time identifying the feeling. I would often avoid spending time in my room if I was alone because it just felt scary. I also heard the sound of the closet doors opening. I would have nightmares about people coming into my room. I don't remember this, but my mom has told me that I sometimes would talk in my sleep. Their bedroom was next to mine, in parentheses, and say stuff like, "Get out!" Then we have the experience that I remember most clearly. It was around 3 in the afternoon. I had just arrived home from school. The rest of my family was away grocery shopping. This was not unusual. I had been home alone multiple times. So I walk up to the house, open the door, and just get inside, and I hear something. Loud breathing coming from upstairs. Then I hear heavy footsteps, slow but determinate. They go from my room to the stairs. I bolt outside, scared half to death. My first thought was that a burglar was inside the house. I waited in the rain for 30 minutes before my family came home and I told them about what had happened. They found nothing. I thought I would end this by retelling an experience my mother's boyfriend had. He was and is a skeptic towards anything paranormal. So one evening we had a friend over. My mom was at work. I was at a friend's house and my sister was sleeping upstairs. It's important to note that my sister was 3 at this time. He was in the living room, which was located downstairs underneath my room, watching some TV with a friend. They're talking and having a good time. Suddenly, they are interrupted by a thud above them, in my room. And then they hear slow, heavy footsteps going from my room and stopping at the stairs. They both freeze up and fix their gaze on the top of the stairs. After a couple of seconds, they remember my little sister being asleep upstairs, so they gather the courage to rush upstairs but find nothing. The friends got so spooked by this that he went home and my mother's boyfriend eventually admitted that even he could not explain it. The Smiling Lady! Exclamation mark. The incident is from the Madh Islands, a bunch of islands in the outskirts of Mumbai, the capital of the Indian state of Maharashtra. Madh Islands are still not very well developed. It is still considered a remote place with roads built around forest areas. Not all parts of the roads are well lit by streetlights. Some don't even have them. Only very few residential properties are there. Around 12 years ago, Sumukhi, a friend of the narrator, went to visit one of her friends who used to live on Madh Island. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. It was around 1 a.m. Luckily, she found an empty taxi passing by. She sat down at the back seat. After a few moments of driving, Sumukhi noticed that someone was sitting beside her, an old lady with a big, creepy smile on her face. Dressed up in a white sari, a traditional dress of Indian women, sat beside her, but not looking toward her but staring in front, not looking towards Sumukhi. Sumukhi noticed all of this in the corner of her eyes. She could not believe if this was all real. She did not dare to take a look, as if she did, all of this would become real. She could see that the lady was smiling, not even by looking at her, just from her peripheral vision. Sumukhi was frozen, her face gray pale, not knowing what to do, fear growing every moment that would happen as if she turned her head to see her. At this point, tears rolled down her eyes, praying to God that her destination arrive soon. She kept her eyes straight the whole time. Nobody talked throughout the journey. A few minutes pass by and she reaches the destination. The taxi stops outside the front gate of her friend's villa. It would soon take a minute's walk to reach the doorbell, as it was a huge villa. Sumukhi tells the driver to drop her inside, in front of the door. For some reason, the driver hesitates, but gives it to Sumukhi to assist him, now crying. She is unable to take it anymore. She just wants to jump out of the taxi and run as fast as she can, but doesn't want the driver to leave her alone. The car drops her in. The old lady is still sitting, smiling, but not looking at Sumukhi. As soon as the car stops, Sumukhi jumped out of the car and gave the driver the money, still not looking at the lady, still crying. But as soon as the driver took the money, he looked at Sumukhi with a blunt face, somewhat scared, and asked her, "Ma'am, did you see that lady too?" From the Mouth of Babes. I was watching my grandchild that evening. It was a quiet evening, and after cooking and eating dinner that I had prepared for my grandchild, I retired to the living room to watch the news, leaving my grandchild playing in the hallway outside my bedroom door so I could keep an eye on her. My grandchild was a sweet 5-year-old, and I left her coloring and playing with her dolls quietly. I sat in my living room chair, turned on the television, turning the sound down on low so I could hear my little ones if she called out for me for anything. After about an hour or so, I head down to her, in conversation with someone. There was no one else in the house besides myself and her who she could have a conversation with. I sat dumbfounded, thinking that it must be her playing with her dolls. I dismissed it, turned my attention to what was transpiring on the television screen. After a few minutes and the conversation with my grandchild still going on, I began to listen in on her conversation with what I thought was her dolls. However, to my amazement, the conversation was well beyond just playing with her dolls. She was asking questions, and it seemed like someone, although I could not hear them, was in turn responding back to her. My curiosity kept me glued to the seat as I listened for another minute or two, before deciding to go and see whom or what she was interacting with. Before I could get up and out of my seat, she stepped into the room with me, sat down beside me, and asked, "Sweetheart, who were you talking to? Were you playing with your dolls?" She turned and looked up at me and said, "No, Grandma, I was talking to your mama and daddy." I said, "Babe, you couldn't possibly be talking to Mother and Father. They've been dead for so many years now." My grandbaby looked at me very seriously and matter-of-factly and said, "Granny, they were asking me questions about you and how you were doing. Granny, they told me to tell you that they love and miss you." From that night on, there was never a mention from her about my deceased parents, and this never happened again, when it was just the two of us at the house. However, without a single doubt in my mind, I know that evening my parents were there checking in on me through my grandbaby. This incident still brings tears to my eyes when I think or talk about it. Ghost in a Kimono, a true experience. I used to put my daughter to bed by reading her story and sitting in front of her until she went to sleep. This allowed me to spend much-needed quality time with her after a very long day on the job. We started to notice that when we woke up in the mornings to go to daycare, she always complained of being tired. After a few weeks of her complaining to be tired and not wanting to get up for school, we started to question her. I knew for a fact that she was going to sleep because many of the nights I had fallen asleep on her floor, and upon waking to take myself to bed, I would notice that she was sound asleep. After some prompting and questioning her, this is the story that she told us. It seems that very late in the evening, after we were all in bed asleep, she would be awakened by an old lady with a very colorful long dress that would tickle her feet and wake her up at night. My daughter exclaimed. The lady never spoke, just smiled, gave her a couple of tickles on her feet, and just sat and watched over her until she fell back asleep. This occurrence happened for over a month, and although I made it to the point to spend the night in her room a couple of times just to confirm or debunk her claims, this apparition still came in the quiet of the night after I was asleep and continued the ritual, despite the fact my large butt was laying on the floor. I never heard my daughter stir and never caught a glimpse of the old lady. At one point, my daughter happened to see a photo of a person wearing a colorful kimono, at which point she exclaimed that the lady had been visiting her wore a colorful dress just like that. Not the same one in the picture, but similar. Now my daughter is half Japanese, and at that point in her life, she had never worn or seen anyone in a kimono. She was just dead set that this was a similar dress to what the old lady wore upon entering her room and interacting with her. After many discussions with my wife, we chalked it up to my wife's grandmother, who may have been doing the visitations. My wife had been close to her grandmother, and was the first one at a very young age to find her grandmother deceased in the bathtub. Needless to say, it was a traumatic experience for my wife, who again was very close to her grandmother. Prompting more of a description of the kindly old lady for my daughter. As to what the lady looked like, it was confirmed that it was my wife's grandmother visiting the grandchild she never got to see. We were overjoyed by this, and yet broken up, and wished we had the chance or ability to see her and express our love and thanks for looking over our daughter. However, as the month passed, with my daughter being awoken every night and tired in the morning, with a heavy heart, I went into my daughter's room while everyone was out of the house, and with the utmost respect and reverence, asked grandmother not to wake the baby anymore. She needed her rest for school, and that she loved her, and we were happy that she wanted to visit and see her grandchild, but could no longer wake her up to let her see her. Truly, it was one of the hardest and most heartfelt things I had done, but I knew it was right. The next evening, my daughter had a sound sleep. When asked, she told us that the old lady had come to say goodbye and never showed herself again. As I write this, I'm so thankful that from beyond the grave, grandmother wanted to see and meet my granddaughter, her granddaughter. And although we have never had another encounter with the grandmother in the kimono, I know that she's still out there, watching over our family. Devil in Disguise. This story comes down from my grandparents, who grew up in a small town in El Salvador. This is one among many encounters with the paranormal in their lives. Like many in El Salvador, my grandparents come from a town deeply religious and entrenched in the Catholic faith. Angels and demons are a real part of everybody's lives. My grandmother was 9 months pregnant with my uncle when her water finally broke. It was the middle of the night. Unfortunately for my grandparents, their house was on the other side of the town river, where lighting was poor and roads were made of dirt. To get to the town center to catch a ride to the hospital, my grandparents needed to walk across a narrow, poorly lit bridge and up a large hill. An uneasy trek even when you're not getting ready to give birth. As my grandparents reach the river, they can hear the flow of the water and the cool breeze. My grandfather tells my grandmother to stay strong and focused. This is no time to be caught off guard. As they're about to walk across the bridge, my grandmother hears a cry, a little girl, barefoot and sitting on a rock by the river. "Help me," she says. She can't be more than 5 years old. The little girl is looking right at my grandmother. "Help me, I have a splinter in my foot." My grandmother immediately feels a sense of motherly duty, and it came over her as the little child tends to her foot. My grandmother becomes very concerned for this little girl sitting on a rock in the middle of the night. She approaches the little girl, who's got tears streaming down her face. As she reaches closer, my grandfather leaps in between them. He takes out his machete, and with a swift movement, he makes the sign of a holy cross with her in front of the little girl. To my grandmother's amazement, the girl disappears immediately. My grandfather turns to her and says, "You know better than this. You know the evil disguises itself as innocent and inviting as it can." My grandmother begins to sob and thanks my grandfather as they continue their journey to the hospital. My encounter with a ghost back in 2000. This happened when I was 13 years old, spending the Christmas holiday abroad in a rural part of France. My parents are French, and I was born in France, but I grew up in Canada since I was 2 years old. We spent a lot of summer and winter holidays there. I was staying with relatives of mine in their house when this occurred, which was a very old farmhouse. One particular day, my cousins and I decided to stay inside for the day because it was snowing heavily. We spent most of the day just wasting time and horsing around. A little later in the afternoon, my older cousin and I went up into the attic together because she was looking for something, and I followed her because I was curious to see the attic. There was a lot of stuff up there that interested me, like old books and some antique items. Once she found what she needed, I asked her if it was okay if I stayed up there for a while to look around. She giggled and said something to the effect of, "Why? It's just a bunch of old shit up here, but yeah, if you want to." I spent about half an hour walking around looking at stuff until I happened upon some old book from the early 1800s that seemed intriguing to me because I was and am a bit of a literature nerd. I sat down and read it for a little while before deciding that I wanted to take it back to my bedroom to read every night before bed. When I closed the book and went to stand up, my gaze immediately shifted over to a woman who was sitting in a chair on the left side of the room. This briefly startled me at first and made me gasp because I'd never seen her before, and I didn't hear her come into the attic. She was wearing very old clothing, had long blonde hair, and she was quite pretty. She looked like she was somewhere between 25 and 30 years old. She didn't look solid, though. It's hard to explain exactly what I mean by that. She wasn't like the stereotypical Hollywoodized translucent ghost, but she had certain opaqueness about her that tells you on an instinctual level that you're not just looking at a living biological entity. She smiled and said to me, "Oh boy, this is French. Désolé si je vous ai fait peur, ma chérie." Sorry if I scared you. At this point, I didn't feel any fear or apprehension at all. This apparition radiated a kind, warm, and positive energy that I could somehow feel right down to my core, and I felt safe in her presence. It was a very brief encounter. Around 5 seconds after she spoke, she stood up, walked about 7 feet to the right of the room, and faded away mid-stride. I just silently sat there, dumbfounded, for a few minutes. When I left the attic, I was hesitant to tell anybody about what I saw, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few days later, I decided to privately ask my youngest cousin about it. She was 8 years old, and I figured that younger kids are usually a little more open to things like this and less judgmental than teenagers and adults. To my surprise, she was quite candid about it. When I asked her if she had seen a lady who appears out of nowhere, she responded, "Do you mean the blonde lady?" When I nodded, she said something to the effect of, "Yeah, I see her sometimes. It's okay, she's nice." She told me that she had been seeing her since she was about 5 years old. We didn't really talk about it more. I didn't tell anybody else what I had seen. It's something that will always vividly stick in my memory because it was so surreal. I can still visually see her face when I close my eyes. I never did find out who she is. The fact that the farmhouse was very old would lead me to believe that she most likely lived there at one time. I don't think that all ghosts are forlorn spirits yearning for something. I've read stories about some that come across as harmless and seem happy. Maybe some of them occasionally enjoy visiting places where there are lots of fond memories for them. My paranoia is at an all-time high. My mom believes I'm a sensitive person in some way, whether that be empathic or a little bit more than that. I'm not so much a believer that I'm those, but I am a believer in paranormal occurrences. This week I've been having a lot of issues sleeping or staying asleep. I suffer from insomnia, especially when I have too much going on with my mental health. School full-time, work full-time, and focus on a big move is making me stressed nonetheless. When this happens, I typically can have a lucid dream, but lately I feel as though I'm losing control of my dreams with weird things happening in them and outside of them. From my sister getting swept away in a tornado, to ghostly figures escaping a satanic setting, to freakish lightning storms, all of which are normal when I'm under heavy amounts of stress. Last night, I had an experience that left me confused. I fell asleep around 1 a.m. I get up for work at around 8:30 a.m., so it's not terrible sleep, but isn't great. Throughout the night, I had been in and out of my sleep, or feeling like I'm not dipping into the needed REM. I fell into lucid slumber. The setting was my old preteen to adulthood home that had sat on a lonely hill. The nearest neighbor wasn't far, but it was a walk. The backside of the house had a full view of the valley below and other mountains across this valley. It was a manufactured home, but in my dream, it lacked repair and seemed abandoned. My parents were there along with my fiancé. It was evening, or maybe even dark or twilight. The sky was blood red. The storm was brewing, distant thunder with blood-red flashes in the sky. A wild pack of dogs roamed the 20-acre property as if to hunt something down, or maybe run away from something. The house didn't have windows, and the doors were torn up, wood doors that didn't look like they could keep even the biggest of dangers out. Basically, all of the Halloween vibes you could think of. I felt nervous and out of control of what was happening. The storm got closer, and my mom told my stepdad not to go outside. He didn't listen. He seemed mesmerized by the sky. He stepped outside onto our paved gravel driveway just outside our front door leading to our garage. Staring at the sky, not breaking contact with my mom, who was now yelling at him to get back inside. I then felt as though I was sucked away into the sky, as if a hand came down and picked me up. And then I hovered over him and could see him staring. He was staring at me. He reached up with both arms and shot down at him as if I was lightning. Then I woke. It was hot. I was dizzy. My fiancé was sweating in his sleep, which is a regular occurrence. Human furnaces, am I right? I laid in bed and listened. It was quiet. I should sleep. I need to, I told myself. I laid there spinning in this daze. Maybe I needed water. Maybe if I just closed my eyes, I could just sleep. I closed my eyes to stop spinning. We lived in a very small cabin, about the size of most people's living rooms. There's a loft above the front door, a small kitchenette on the left, a couch on the right. Behind the couch is our very small room that fits our queen-sized bed and our dog kennel for our pups, and a bathroom behind the kitchenette, all as if to walk in the front door. I laid there getting the courage to either go back to sleep, because it's an emotional battle of its own, or get water. I'm lazy. I tried to sleep. God, why can't I sleep? Hello? I opened my eyes. Did I hear someone? I heard hello. Not possible if it's just us that lives there. It's a newer cabin too. There's no way. I'm not doing this. I need to sleep. I laid there and spinning continued. I needed water. I sat up. The spinning immediately stopped. I know I heard that. It sounded like it came from the couch. I peeked around the corner. I wasn't scared, but curious. Nothing was there. It was silent. Fiancé was asleep. So were the pups. All cuddled in their bed and on my legs. Damn dogs. It was silent. Very quiet. Water isn't worth this right now. I laid back down, going back into my spinning spell. Why can't I sleep? Hello? My eyes shot open. It was an impatient female voice. Came from the couch. Nobody was there when I checked before. And then, as suddenly as I woke, I fell back asleep, as if my body chose to sleep over the paranoia, the vertigo, and the stress this brought me. As if my body said, "This is taking too much energy. I'll handle it from here." I didn't dream after that, but woke to my alarm and came out of another spinning slumber. I've never heard anything vocal before, and it didn't necessarily startle me, but confused me more than anything. I've had many experiences, but this seemed to be the most of what I felt, as something present. Maybe tonight I'll rest. That's the end of today's stories. As usual, I heard your comments, and this particular reading was a response to a rather loud comment that I had read, insinuating that I sounded like a valley girl. And therefore, I removed all of the inflections that were present in the voice as much as I could while reading these sentences, and removed as many question mark sounding cadences as I could possibly find here. So, let me know down below if you enjoyed that, or if you prefer my regular voice speaking how I normally do. And, as always, have a great night. See ya.